Okay, I'm not even going to waste your time. This is the PC that you want to build. So if you have a spare £560, which is apparently how much weekly rent is right now, you can buy yourself a pretty nice PC. Now, if you come to this website, PC Part Picker, I can show you which parts you can get, and I'll explain why they're probably the best. So for the CPU, I picked the Ryzen 5600. Now, if I remove that really quick. Now, if you look at the most popular CPUs, the Ryzen 5600X is £125. However, the 5600 is 108. Which is not a big difference, but if you're counting every penny, you might as well pay a bit less. You're literally getting 200 MHz lower base clock and 200 MHz lower performance boost clock, which is not a massive deal, but if you want to spend the extra £17, go ahead. Now, the reason why I picked the Ryzen 5600 is because it's the latest generation that's supported on AM4. So for the AM4 platform, you're going to be getting the most performance from a single core, and you don't really need to buy 8 cores. If you watch a couple videos, you'll find out that 6 cores is kind of enough, but then you could step up to something like a Ryzen 5700X, which is £145, and you're going to get the benefits of 8 cores, which is basically faster editing and maybe slightly more stable frame rates. But if you're willing to pay more, then you might as well get the 5700X 3D for 195, which is going to be a lot quicker, like 50-60% quicker. But since you're on a budget, then you might want to stay on a 5600. And the reason why I'm not going to AM5 is if you look up a 7600X, it's £186, which is the same as the 5700X 3D. And for this price, you're still getting 6 cores, which is quite expensive, and you could pay the premium and the motherboard premium and the RAM premium to invest yourself into the AM5 platform. But again, if you're looking for something really cheap, you might want to consider staying on AM4 for now. Now, this CPU comes with a cooler, so you don't actually have to pick one. But if you really wanted to, you can get the Peerless Assassin, which, according to a lot of videos, it's one of the best air coolers. And it's something like £35, which is so much cheaper than any other cooler, especially the liquid coolers. They are so expensive, and for this budget, it's definitely not worth it. And then if you look at the motherboard, I picked basically the cheapest motherboard. Now, here's the thing, if you're buying a Ryzen 5, you're probably not going to be overclocking, and you don't really care about the VRMs or the temperatures so much because it's a 65 watt CPU, it's not really going to get heated. Now, this is a lot cheaper than all the other motherboards. However, you're missing out on quite a few things. So first of all, that motherboard doesn't have any PCIe 4 NVMe slots, so you're going to be using SATA SSDs. And second thing, you're only getting 2 RAM slots. So say if you buy 2 8GB sticks and you have 16 gigs, if you want to upgrade to 32 gigs, you're going to have to sell your current RAM sticks and then buy 2x16. Whereas with 4 memory slots, you can keep the 2 8GB sticks and then buy 2 more, and you'll have 4 times 8, which is 32 gigs. Now, if you look at something like this, the Gigabyte 8520M, it has 4 RAM slots. If I click on the picture, it has a PCIe 4 and it has a bunch of USB 3 ports. So if it's something that you really care about, you might want to buy this instead. Now for the RAM, I went for Corsair Vengeance 2x8, and now again, if you look at a bunch of benchmark videos, 16 gigs is kind of enough. It depends what games you play. If you're playing slightly older games, then you're probably going to be able to get away with 16 gigs. However, if you want to play the newest games, you might want to upgrade to 32, but this is £36, so it's a good deal. So if you're looking for 32 gigs, you can get the same kit, the Corsair Vengeance 2x16, for only £65, so it's £30 more. And what you could do is you could get the 2x8 module, and then in the future, if you got the more expensive motherboard with 4 slots, you could buy the same RAM kit. Now, this is not recommended, but because it's the same company at the same exact speed, you could buy the same module twice in the future and have 4 8GB sticks, and then you'll have 32 gigs of RAM. Now for the storage, I have the Crucial P3 Plus 1TB. Now this is quite simple, you're not going to get a hard drive, it's not 2017, and if you pick the motherboard with the PCIe 4 slot, you can buy one of these NVMe's. So if you find a P3 Plus, £63, it's a high quality SSD, it's good for gaming, it's good for Windows, and again, for now, it's going to be enough, but then you still have the options to buy a bunch of SATA SSDs. Now for the GPU, I picked the RX 6600 Non-XT. Now this is £178, which I think is probably the best GPU for the money that you can get. Now if you take a look, the most popular card is probably the 3060, which is £250, and it's a good £70 more, and you're gonna get maybe 20-30% more performance. But honestly, the 6600 is good enough for every game. And if you spend the extra £70, you're going to get 4 gigabytes more of memory, you're going to get DLSS, and you're going to get ray tracing. But let's be honest, at this budget, ray tracing is kind of useless. Now for the case, this is very subjective because this is mainly aesthetic, and the only thing you have to worry about is your motherboard fitting in. But if you look at the compatibility list, this is compatible. And the only thing I'd recommend in terms of cases is that the case should probably have a tempered glass side panel, because the plastic ones are going to feel super cheap and you probably don't want that. And then you want some kind of a PSU cover, which if you look at this case, this is a different case, but you have this black square cover that covers your PSU, and that basically hides all your cables. So if you don't have one of these, your cables are going to be so messy. So this is purely an aesthetic reason, but it's definitely something I'd recommend. And then for the power supply, I picked the Corsair 650 watt 80 plus gold certified, and it's only £75. Now in terms of power supplies, the prices vary so much. There's so many sales going on, but essentially you want to look at something that's at least 650 watts for this budget. And obviously for the parts that you picked, you don't really need more than 650 watts. Even if you buy something like an RTX 4070, the 650 watt is gonna be enough, and it's 80 plus gold certified, so it's gonna be quite efficient. Yeah, and you definitely don't need any of these like 1000 watt power supplies, because one, they're too expensive, and two, you're just never going to use 1000 watts. And yeah, this is £564, so let me know if you would change anything. Personally, if I had this budget, I would probably change the CPU to the 5700X, pay the extra £70–80. I'd get a slightly more expensive motherboard with the PCIe 4 slot, and then I'd change the motherboard because this motherboard supports the storage, the PCIe 4 NVMe. I would definitely change the RAM to 32 gigs, and that's kind of it actually, because with the graphics card, you could upgrade that, but honestly the 3060 is not worth it. Anything after that becomes way more expensive, and honestly a good upgrade from this would probably be like a 7800 XT, which is £449. So yeah, it's the 6600 or this, because everything in between doesn't really make sense. The 6600 will run literally every single game, and this will run 2 to 3 times quicker. So if you really need that performance, then you can just get this.